your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio.
Are you ready to travel? We got all the travel buzz here on Smart People Travelwise with Alvin Adriano on PHLV Radio.
Right. Hello and good day to all of our viewers today. I'm so thrilled to bring you back for another great show. I'm thankful to be here each week to touch up a little bit on travel. So Smart People Travelwise is all about what's going on with travel through the eyes of travel professionals, tour operators, and like today, travel media. I'm your host, Alvin Adriano, CEO of Travelwise International, and today I have the pleasure of bringing on a colleague who I met as a member of a volunteer organization that we both serve on, PhilPro. PhilPro is a Filipino Young Leaders Program, and it started back in 2012 and has evolved into a community of like-minded, highly successful Filipino leaders. And we are also looking for volunteers to help support some upcoming projects, but I'm super excited to have her. She's awesome. The show's going to be filled with information about points, frequent flyer miles, and the travel future of travel. But she's a ball of energy and continues to create content, leaving a blazing trail wherever she goes. But before we get started, please, as a reminder for all of our viewers, if you're watching this live, please hashtag live. And if you're watching on the replay, hashtag replay. Share where you're watching from so we can acknowledge all of our fans out there. Don't forget to catch our show on Facebook and YouTube, or you can catch the show on Amazon Fire, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Or you can even download the app PHLV Radio, available on all iOS and Android devices. So today's guest is Leezel Tanglao. She's a bridge journalist at the intersection of editorial, product, business development, and sales. She's worked for several media companies, including HuffPost, Associated Press, CNN, CBS News.com, Vice News, ABSNews.com, and Press Enterprise. She's currently the Director of Audience Insights and Innovation for the Points Guy, and she is the Filipino Young Leaders Program Vice President and the Chair of the PhilPro COVID-19 Task Force. She's a program director and spokesperson for the Caretaker Project's Tayo Help Desk for the Filipino community for COVID-19. Please smash those heart buttons and please give Ms. Leezel Tanglao a well-deserved thank you for being here today.
Hey, Alvin, thank you so much for inviting me here today.
Awesome. How are you? And what's going on, Leezel? Where are you at right now? California?
I am currently in Southern California. I am from Carson, California. So you can see my background is LA. But yeah, with the recent return to travel, I find myself back in the skies again. So that is a relevant question to ask. Where are you currently?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's been 15 months since we've been in the pandemic, and I know everyone in the travel trade business is just excited to get things moving. But, I mentioned your bio at working for the Points Guys. I know a lot of viewers may not be familiar with the Points Guys. Can you give a little bit of information about the Points Guy and your actual role in that company?
Sure. So the Points Guy was started by Brian Kelly, who is literally the Points Guy back in 2010. And it's really a way to help maximize your points and miles. So if you really know how to utilize, loyalty programs, things you can get through credit cards, you can literally travel for free on a very semi-regular basis. So a lot of my colleagues have done that. And it's incredible when you finally realize, oh my gosh, I can actually do this. You don't have to be rich. You just have to know the game and how to play it and how to accumulate it. It actually becomes pretty fun once you kind of get over the, oh my God, there's so many rules and whatnot. And but in the end, if you know kind of how to maximize it, it's essentially the way I think about points and miles is another form of currency. So it's just really kind of how you decide to spend it, how do you earn it, and really continue to kind of just dream about where you want to go. So it's in many ways, it can be a way to make travel accessible, but I think a lot of people don't really realize what to do with it. So at TPG, which is the acronym we like to call the Points Guy, we try to serve the reader by, publishing a lot of servicey type of content of like, if you have an Amex Platinum card, or if you have, Chase, how can I best use these points to go to X, Y, and Z, things like that. So, yeah.
No, that's awesome. I mean, coming from your background, you worked for a lot of finance type of publications and media. And so what brought you to travel? I mean, going from, I guess, money, I guess it's the same thing, like another form of currency. I guess that's the original Bitcoin, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know about Bitcoin, but yes, but like I think in many ways, currency, I think oftentimes is just always kind of seen from just pure money, but there's different types of currency. Obviously, currency of travel, I think we don't always talk about. And certainly with points and miles, that's definitely currency. It's really kind of what value you put on certain things and what you're willing to spend or use. So yeah, I mean, I think it's been kind of a long journey getting to this place. I mean, I came from very much hard news features background, worked at a bunch of other places. But when the opportunity came up to work at a place like the Points Guy, I was like, I can't turn that down. Like, who wouldn't want to work at a place where, you really think about travel beyond just like the featurey, but really like, how can I really use what I have to go to where I need to go? Yeah. And and also take along a couple of people along the way. So it's been a really fascinating journey. And, I just started here in the winter, I would say the winter of this year. So still fairly new and still trying to get to the level of my other colleagues who are definitely experts in the points and miles game. I would say I'm still a novice, but there is a lot of things you can learn, I think, in many ways, just trying to figure out, okay, what card to use or what should, what loyalty program I should sign up for and all that. So once you kind of get it, it's just like you're thinking about it all the time, which can be good and bad at the same time. So, yeah.
Oh, no, that's interesting. Again, like, having this type of explosion of programs have really evolved how people travel, where they can travel to and what's available. Because before, it's only been about 40 years since frequent flyer miles really have taken off and evolved to what they are now. But your role, I know you said you were pretty new, but what does a director of audience insights and innovation do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I think that's an evolving definition, okay. But in many ways, it's a culmination of kind of how, like, the roadmap of my career. And I'd like to say, as a Filipino American, it's very indicative of just who I am, just in general as a person. I'd like to say that, we are the original bridge people, especially folks that have to bridge a lot of gaps within our own family, especially as a daughter of a child of immigrants. Mm-hmm. You're literally in two spaces at once all the time. So I kind of look at my role as that, since, the company I currently work for is very data driven, which is amazing. I love it. And then also, the teams that I work with closely care a lot about their content. So how do we best marry the two? And oftentimes it can be hard to translate, insights that you see in data, as well as kind of making sure we're aligned with, are we serving the reader? Who is our audience? And are we serving them up the right type of content and when? So, in many ways, I'm kind of tapping into my very much Filipino-ness to be that bridge between data, between content, between revenue, marketing, because there's a lot we can leverage here, but oftentimes we're not always necessarily speaking the same language, because we can easily just be very siloed in our own areas. But I think that's what it's great about working where I work now, where everyone is so open, everyone is so willing to learn about what we can do better. So, like, I essentially serve kind of in that role to think about, like, are we thinking about the audience, and then also just innovation. I think I've said this in other previous interviews, like, Filipinos are the OG innovators. So we take what we have and we figure out what to do with it. It's not necessarily a new thing, but we innovate and like, not only to necessarily survive, but also thrive. I think we're in kind of that space. So that's kind of how I view my role, to kind of be an advocate for everyone, and basically pass on any learnings and make, data actionable for people. So, yeah.
No, that's awesome. I think there's some powerful nuggets of information that people realize, because we repurpose a lot of things as Filipinos. We try not to be wasteful. When I have an American wife, and that was the first word she told me. She's like, what's wasteful? And I was like, that's a Filipino term, I guess. But we try to manage and maximize the value for anything because we think it's important. And I think that's highly what happens in media now because content is king. Basically managing content to drive decision making is what you do. Watching the demand of travel and how it fluctuates on content on, I guess, social media is the preferred platform right now. But so what does the pattern say right now? When you analyze data, especially, when I think about people who read data like that, the one thing I always think about is like Neo in the Matrix, where he sees code, because to me, I'm just like, I don't know how to read algorithms and stuff like that. I just look it up and they tell me what I like. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much what I do like. But when I hear people say it, I'm just like, oh, maybe they see code everywhere and they just see like fluctuations. Like what are the trends and patterns are coming in, especially in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, months coming into where the light is actually attainable now?
Yeah, I mean, definitely travel is back with a vengeance, I guess, in a good way, especially, coming off of a holiday weekend in the last week or so. By far has been at the top. If you look at just even the TSA numbers, I think we already saw this coming, which is great. But I think what a trend that we're starting, at least I'm starting to keep an eye on is business travel back. Certainly leisure travel has been long overdue since we've been kind of cooped up the last 15 months of the pandemic. So everyone wants to, take advantage of the summer, right, before it gets cold and before kids go to school. But I think what's interesting that we're seeing now is business travel, because I think, business travel obviously took a huge hit when the pandemic hit. But starting to see a lot more interest in terms of meeting up with colleagues in person. I think certainly anecdotally, but just in general, some of the numbers that I've been seeing kind of on some back end things that I have access to, more searches around, business class fares, things like that. So I think that's indicative of not only just in general for a lot of companies, the return to the office. And really kind of putting it into perspective, right? I think we took it for granted pre-pandemic, just kind of that inner face-to-face interaction. And when we didn't have it, it's like, oh my gosh, it wasn't enough for being on a virtual call for like a year. Like it does matter, like having that face-to-face interaction with your clients, your customers, and even within your own team members. So I think what we'll see in the next couple of months, certainly probably heading into the fall, is that rise in business travel, which is going to be interesting to watch.
No, yeah. I mean, everyone's very excited. I know my phones have been ringing. People are ready and set to get out and enjoy and just, get back to some normalcy. And that's kind of the trend that we've been noticing throughout all of our surveys with ASTA, the U.S. Travel and Trade, and WTTC. We've been monitoring all the international and domestic, and it seems like people are starting to feel more comfortable around the pandemic and have started planning. And it's interesting too, because now with the explosion of all of these, we're a year away from travel. And during that time, we have a lot of pent up demand and people have not spent their points. And so now coming into this year, there's a lot of explosion of people taking availability. And so what I do like to remind people is that over the course on balance sheets or anything when it comes to points, when we put on, I guess, their liabilities, there's a huge liability that airlines are now having to figure out how to deal with. And that's important because once you start figuring out how to use your points, one of the things that you could consider is, should you hold or should you start using them now? And I think that's an important thing that we should talk about because everyone has points. And as we continue moving on, is it better to use it or wait?
Yeah, I think it depends, right? I mean, it's certainly for sure, like the pandemic has not stopped the airlines or hotels from making adjustments to their loyalty programs. Right. I will say that if you are kind of in that elite members of any of those, brands or loyalty programs, I think you could probably, in a good sense, probably be assured that your status is probably going to be extended. Mm-hmm. probably a little bit wild, but I think it's a different narrative for folks that are looking to, earn or redeem their points and miles. And I think that's what we, try to keep on top of for our readers at TPG, because, some of these programs, if you've been watching them closely, they've kind of used the downtime to implement sometimes very stealth devaluations, by sometimes removing some award charts, adding new fees for booking award travel. So I think I personally, I'm at the, mindset of like, if you want to travel, you got the points, why not use them, but it's also dependent on what program it is. And also keeping in mind, like, if you're using, for example, like Chase Ultimate Reward points or Amex, there's different, maximizing kind of your one-to-one matches, if you're transfer partners, things like that. So I think, it does beg the question, should we be expecting more major evaluations soon? I wouldn't be surprised. I think this is just cyclical anyway, regardless if there's a pandemic happening. But I think obviously we feel it because a lot of us have been stuck at home the last year and a half. So I think, for the business side of things, I think, loyalty points are going to be more important than ever, right? To chart short-term success. I mean, they've been very powerful tools for those companies. And I think there's definitely an incentive to keep it that way. But yeah, I mean, I think, that's what we try to keep on top of. Our experts that write about this stuff, we keep a very eagle eye on trying to see like, oh, is this a good time? There's a deal. Should I use our points? Or, and also highlighting readers' journeys with their points and miles. So, I think
I think
it's
that's
inevitable.
Great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, that's great. I mean, that's what the Points Guy started and was founded on, trying to maximize spending so that you can get the benefits, so that you can apply it to vacation things, that everyday spending, so that you just get these rewards from there. I do want to touch up on it because, one of the things that I do remember, I know for a fact that Filipinos in the Philippines, they don't really use credit. So credit to them is a whole new arena for them. And when I talk to a lot of travelers, they talk about miles, like I earn miles. And it goes back all the way back to when it was Northwest, and then Delta, it's like, oh, I have Northwest miles, and I want to save it because I know I get a free ticket after 8, and the mentality is that, as long as I take 8 flights, I'll be guaranteed a free flight. But that has changed. And I try to educate people. It's not about earning miles anymore. It's about dollars spent now. It's more about spending points. And that's kind of how they convert. So can you just, for all the viewers who don't know that change or evolution from earning miles to spending points, how that became and what it is now?
Yeah. And I think that's indicative of the rise of like things like credit cards, right? Where they often will offer lucrative sign-on bonuses, 100,000 if you sign on for this card. If you spend X number amount within the first 6 months. It's not, and a lot of airline programs, loyalty programs, it's not just purely flying the amount of time you fly. It's also tied to things like co-branded credit cards, or, separately, like if you, have one of those other credit cards that have these transferable points, that's where you can earn a lot of these things. So that's why they're very tied together. But I want to go back to a earlier point you made about the Philippines and just like credit cards and how that's kind of a very foreign concept. And it's interesting because I actually did an entire around just debt, right? And I think that's indicative of why a lot of Filipinos don't necessarily have credit cards, especially in the Philippines. I can't speak to our folks here, but there is that kind of fear of debt, right? And so I personally also had that fear because it's like, oh my God, what if I can't? You shouldn't, as a cardinal rule, you should not sign up for a credit card if you don't have money to pay for it, right? And there's always that temptation. So I think that is still there. But I think once you get over that, there is such power in understanding this whole, like, if I use this card, I get 5x more points per dollar. So it more than triples the value of like $1 instead of using your debit card or just cash, which you don't get anything beyond that. So I think that's where I think might be a fairly new concept for folks if you're just so used to like, I just want to pay it and not worry about paying something later, if we're not being on the hook. But if you are able to discipline yourself and, obviously don't spend more than what you have, it can be very lucrative. This is how you can go on vacation for free or get other things or get cash back. So yeah, I think it's a lot of it is an education game, especially within certain communities such as ours as well.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we haven't really absorbed yet, because there's just with the different types of leveraging programs, it's not just about frequent flyers miles. It's really like a lifestyle type of thing, because now you get paid or you get rewarded for how you spend at different retailers, depending on how they partner. And that's really where the explosion happened, where before it was industry related, whether it's travel, car rentals, hotel stays. Now you can get discounts for gift certificates. You can apply it to like virtual experiences. You can, there's so many things that you can apply it for. And so they've partnered with so many programs that it's just really, really smart to take advantage of these things that we have here. So yeah, I thank you so much for having that discussion, and I would love to talk about this more. So after the break, Leezel and I will talk a little bit more about the future of travel, what's in store, and so we'll catch you after the break. See you guys in a little bit. Welcome back to Smart People Travelwise. I'm your host, Alvin Adriano, and I'm here with Leezel Tanglao from TPG, the Points Guide, discussing on how travel space continues to evolve and how it will affect travelers' points, the way they earn, and of course, how they redeem them. So moving on, during the pandemic, travel benefits, in-person events were canceled for public health reasons. However, they created a dilemma for people to use their points. Now, with all the pent-up demand, how do you think travel will evolve in the future? Do you think it will be a revolution more suited for consumers' benefit, or an evolution where streamline operations to make it more opportunistic for brands and carriers?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think the pandemic has really surfaced a lot of things that I think we knew was on the surface, but now it's very apparent. I think, it has changed the way we look at travel. It's changed the way we work with each other. I think from the traveler's point of view, it's really kind of opened up more possibilities and destinations that I think the pre-pandemic traveler would have never suggested. I think obviously given, obviously safety concerns and comfort levels, the fact that there is like a rental car shortage is actually really interesting to me, where it's like, I think, you can't, for fear of whatever, like getting on a plane in those earlier months this year, people hit the road, which in many ways I think is great. It's kind of almost a celebration of just like rediscovering even just, areas local to you, which I don't know if that would have happened if the pandemic didn't happen, right? So it's like really looking at travel in a very different way, where travel doesn't necessarily mean you need to be on a plane 3,000 miles away. Travel can be as simple as like 1 hour somewhere that, I haven't been to, or I haven't been to in a while. So that's kind of really reevaluated that. I think for the folks on the business side, I think it's really, being more intentional and thoughtful. Like it's not just, obviously the vacation end of things, leisure, but also thinking just even mechanically, just logistically, like what does travel look like in different configurations, and how do we get people to one place into another, in different accessibility type of things. Also making sure things are accessible, which I love to see. I like seeing that now, that like we're thinking about the full holistic traveler, not just the standard kind of like, personas. So in that sense, I think it's been good.
Yeah, and I think now, like, I mean, everything has evolved. You mentioned before how there have been credit cards have been stealthier at how they've managed to, reduce award things, redemptions, and so forth. But during the pandemic, to increase, I guess, cash lines, credits, they had great incentives. I mean, like you mentioned before, 100,000 bonus points, sign up for these credit cards, spending here, incentive spending or spending with certain retailers. It was a big boom last year and people were really like taking advantageous opening lines of credit. Do you think that's going to continue on forward? Those types of like forward bonus point type of things in credit cards to attract people to maintain their lines of credit, especially for big spenders?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's currently a bunch of those 100K bonuses happening right now. So, I mean, I think it's probably the perfect kind of intersection right now where travel is back and people are looking to try to get out and how to get there without and definitely maximizing resources. So having a card that earns points is one way to do that. So I don't see that actually slowing down anytime soon. I think if anything, it's going to increase as people kind of get back out there and, try to reconnect with loved ones and as well as try to go to new places. It's been a long haul. So I think this is one way that people can access that.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, with everything going on, I believe that the travel people will be more keen to travel because they're a lot more, I guess, informed when it comes to now with terms and conditions of how they've been traveling, especially with tour operators, cancellation policies, force majeure. And I think now people are going to start seeing the value of using their points, being able to access it. And the limited accessibility, I think that's going to blow open a lot of possibilities for them to find ways to attract new people. You mentioned about business travel slowly coming back, and those were actually the chairmen of people who would take advantage of those points. Do you think it will take 2 to 3 years before we reach pre-pandemic levels of travel again, or do you think it's still going to be like a tier program where certain sectors of travel will come back first?
I wish I had a crystal ball to accurately answer that. I do think it's going to take some time. I do think it was interesting to see actually just regular travel just bounce back pretty quickly. I think we were all a little like surprised. Oh, wow, it's already here. Great. Mm-hmm. And I think that's indicative of like where we currently at and, the country we currently live in terms of just getting the vaccination stuff up and just having that comfort level like really ease up. With business travel, I think that's tied to a lot of like corporations plans to bring their employees back. And, and also obviously it's going to also depend on where we are in the pandemic. So hopefully I think that's where we're all kind of like keeping track of it, but it's gonna, if I had to predict, it's probably more of a tiered kind of approach right now. Just like with a lot of companies right now trying to figure out, well, when do we bring our folks back and whatnot, and then just getting people comfortable in this normal or whatever new normal we like to call this new situation that we're currently in.
So yeah, everyone keeps talking about the new normal. Is this the new normal? Being able to travel with travel restrictions, knowing how flexible cancellation policies now, change fees removed. How will that play a part in the reward system with points? Now that change fees are gone, how do you apply value to people who use their points and then have to cancel?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the reality moving forward. So if this is quote unquote normal, it certainly is the new normal. I think this will definitely cause people to be more aware of a lot of those terms and conditions. Not that they weren't before, but even more so now, especially if, the changing situation with depending on where you are and where you're traveling to, the pandemic, all those restrictions, things like that, you have to be aware. Because I think the last thing you want to do is try to travel and you get turned away for whatever reason. So I think if anything, it's going to create more of a savvier group of travelers, or at least leveled up. I think we've always had folks, especially in the points and miles game, that knew the ins and outs, but even more so now, I think it's also brings in all those folks that are trying to use it, be more aware of it so that they're not caught off guard.
No, that's awesome. Like we're still waiting for the evolution of everything to happen. We're still adapting. Every day I find new news, new segments. And I think they talked about airlines having to refund baggage fees if they're delayed by over 12 hours. And so, all these things that are coming to fruition, everything that we want, we're starting to see, and airlines are being pushed to the limit because they still have to make profit. And I think it's going to be advantageous for consumers to really understand how everything plays a part, whether it's points, whether it's miles, whether it's credit cards, and all their transactions that occur during the process. So for any tips and advice for travelers or viewers who are still novices in the credit card game, into the bonus points, how can they start? What would be the first tip for them? Besides visiting TPG.
Besides being loyal readers to TPG. I think, if you don't already have a credit card, I think it's worth exploring. There's so many different credit cards there that you can take a look at and start, and then just start, obviously read the terms and conditions and see if it aligns with what you currently spend now. Because then that's where, once you start seeing those points earned, then that actually, it kind of gives you that incentive to be like, oh, okay. And really think about, should I be using, my card for this? Because essentially it's sort of like free currency in a way, right? Because it's like you can double, like instead of just, paying it once, you're actually sort of paying yourself back in a way. Because it's like, I can earn, like, for example, there's one card that I have that I use for my Lyft rides. Currently, the offer right now is, I think if I use Lyft and use this card with it, I get 10x per mile, which is like, so it's more than double like what I would just get on its own. So that's like, why wouldn't you want to take advantage of that? So I think, if you are scared of credit cards, like maybe start small. There are like starter cards, and we definitely have guides around that. And then once you kind of get comfortable, you can kind of level up and try other things. I think it's just worth giving a try. It may not be for everyone, but I think once you kind of enter this world, it's kind of hard not to unsee it, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
It's the potential, because that's what it is. You're taking advantage of the potential if you spend this. And so, I guess my next follow-up question is there, for people who don't understand the game, is there criteria? Because they're just different types of credit cards. There's airline credit cards. There's regular with bank credit cards. There are hotel credit cards. There's retail credit cards. There's all types of credit cards. So when we start, should we base it off a criteria of like, interest percentages, or is it based on our lifestyle, how we spend? What would be a good way to evaluate, compare all the different credit cards and their benefits?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what your goal is. I remember talking to a friend who asked me this very question because he was planning to take a trip to Milan later in the fall, and he's like, what's the best way to get there? What can I do? And I basically asked him, well, what's your goal? Is your goal to get the cheapest flight? Do you have any status on any current airlines? Do you care about if you're flying first class or comfort or one of those upgraded economy seats? So it really depends, because that will help drive kind of the decision making you need to make in terms of like, should I get, a regular card, like an Amex card, a Chase card, or something that's co-branded with one of the loyalty programs. Because once you have that, that's an easier way to start with. Because otherwise, there's just way too many possibilities, and you kind of have to narrow it down. And again, it goes back to, would you rather want to earn that elite status so you can, fly first class or get upgrades at hotels? Or is it more of you just want to get the most bang for your buck? So there's definitely different cards and configurations you can work with. It just depends on what your goal is.
No, I think that's important. I think that's great. I mean, knowing what the end result is so that you can, curtail what card that you want instead of trying to just figure out what's available and just picking any card. I think that's really important. If you want cash back, or if you are looking for miles, or just depending on what you plan on using it for, will determine which card that you actually sign up for. I wanted to go back because you mentioned that you have a card just for Lyft, and so for people who are unfamiliar with the credit card game, there's this misconception that, well, so should I have like a million credit cards? Will that kill my credit score? Is it dangerous to have so many credit cards if I'm using one credit card for just one type of spending? What's TPG's take on that, or your take on that?
Yes and no. Obviously, I think what kills your score is if you cancel cards. I mean, it depends. I mean, there are some of my colleagues have like 20 cards. I definitely do not have 20 cards. But it's also dependent on what you also qualify for. There is a thing called the 524 rule, which I don't know how much people know about it, but this is specific to like a Chase card, right? So and there's a lot of like offer sign-on bonuses connected to Chase right now. So this might be important to know, but like if you're applying for any of those cards on Chase, whether it's a Sapphire Preferred or Reserve or a Freedom card or a Business Inc. card, you can't have opened up 5 or more personal cards across any bank in the last 24 months. And that's key. So you actually need to be under that limit. But that only applies to Chase. So that count doesn't include other cards from other banks. But obviously Chase is a big player in this. But in general, I mean, I think, obviously I just go back to don't spend more than what you have, that can get you in a lot of trouble because it's also, it also gets connected to your credit card, your credit score. Certainly you don't want to apply to so many because then, that also, we can go into even deeper, like the whole, like that requires like a hard pull, right? And then the soft pulls and that can hurt your credit score. So I think you just have to be strategic and intentional about why would you want to get that card and what's your goal for it versus I would apply to everything. I mean, you can certainly do that, but again, that you just have to keep in mind that's likely going to impact your credit score, which obviously is an important number when you're applying for lines of credit, not just for credit cards, but things like mortgages, things like that. So, yeah. Awesome.
No, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I mean, it's important for people to understand, like there's a card for everyone, like everyone's preferences. Nothing is like a cookie cutter. Every card has different programs, different incentives, different bonuses. And so I'm really glad that you were able to point that out and hopefully educate some people about the possibilities of using points in the future. So yeah, I mean, I'm thankful for you to be here and talking to us. I kind of want to spin off a little bit because you are Filipino and you are in media. And I know it's one thing that you mentioned, especially with what you were talking about, debts. I know you had a podcast called Blood Debts. And you have been very active in promoting Filipino stories, Filipino issues in media. How important do you think representations for Asian Americans, especially Filipinos, in media is? And, what do you think we should do to continue having our voices heard in media?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a member of the media, so I see it from both ends, and it's crucially important because I always like to say that, especially for the generation right behind me, it's like you can't be what you don't see, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just our stories matter, our voices matter, and it's tough when you don't see somebody that looks like you in these key places from all ends. So not only on the ground, but also in decision-making places. So it's just as important that we are amplifying each other, but also not being afraid to tell our story. I think, there was a time where it may not have been advantageous for you to share that, it's this or that. But I think even more so now, I think in my own journey, I'm just like, it's actually a disadvantage to do that. Like, why not double down? I can't change who I am. Mm-hmm. And I have a story to tell. And if people don't want to hear it, then that's on them, not on me. Mm-hmm. I think we're all part of this larger narrative. And if we don't stand up and speak up for it in our own ways, we just disappear from that. And that, to me, that's like a tragedy. So I think it's just as important to make sure that we are telling these stories, and especially the ones that are very difficult conversations to have, because I think everyone can probably all relate, but who here has had conversations around debt, for example, right? I think that is something that impacts you regardless if you're rich or poor. Yeah. But like debt, not only the beyond monetary, like debt to your family, debt to yourself, debt of time, you know? So especially like when we think about time now in the time of Corona, like what do I have debt to travel, you know? So everyone's trying to cash in, right? So I think it's just as important that I think, you know, not only for the larger community, but for yourself, like, you know, that your story does matter. And we all have, there's not just one narrative, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's perspective for everything. I think now that we had time from our daily routines to kind of think about our purpose, be mindful of our surroundings and how we influence other people. I think we really had a time to understand what it is that we want to do. And I think representation in all industries is very important, especially for Filipinos, because we are left, you know, we're just a very passive culture. And there are things that we have perspective on, and it's important that we do what we say, like voice out so that people understand. And I did a series with Kat Aniba from Spotlight TV, and I was really, and you know, people like her and you trailblazing the way for media for Filipinos, and being able to be visible is important. You know, I have a daughter too, and I love the fact that she can see more Filipinos, more Asian Americans on TV, books written about her, just represented in her view, so that gives her opportunity to think of the things that she may think is impossible. So kudos to you, and shout outs for all the travel media who are Filipino, who are constantly spreading the positivity and our culture in many ways in media. So with that said, we're getting close to the end of our show. Leezel, I wanted to thank you again for being here and sharing your knowledge, and just educating all of our viewers about the importance or just the value of having credit cards, and using it to maximize your spending in a way where you can get additional benefits, whether it's travel, cash back, or using it in programs that you feel are comfortable to your lifestyle. But with that said, did you want to leave us with any final thoughts or any plugs or things that you're doing?
Yeah, so let me caveat that with the credit card. So obviously, like I said, and this will only work if you don't spend more than what you have. And I would say don't just get it just to spend it either. You know, obviously this just doubles down what you would currently already spend. So I guess what I'm saying is that just don't get it and then just spend just whatever the limit to get the bonus. But I just want to pay it back
at the end of the month.
You still have to pay it back. Like that's not just free money, you know, you still have to pay it back. So I just want to make sure we emphasize that, because the last thing I would want is to encourage people to get into more debt. Just make sure, like, if you're going to like spend, you know, use the card, you do have to pay it back. So again, I go back to don't spend more than what you have. But it's just good to know, like, these cards actually do reward you with like normal spends. Like, you know, if you put your utility bill on there, your streaming bill, you can get rewarded back like 2 times, 3 times, depending on the card. So what I'm saying is that, like, if you spend a certain amount of expenses every month anyway. So instead of like putting on your debit card or whatever, you can use these cards and you can get something back on top of it, you know? So it's somewhat of a kind of an interesting investment in a way, if you think about it. But all I'm saying is don't spend anything you don't have. Like, I'm not condone, like, we don't want people more to get into debt. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Leezel, for spending some time chatting us. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you and talk travel, and hopefully soon we get to meet, and, you know, our paths will cross in travel. Yes. And we get to meet in person. So thank you so much for being here. Awesome. So 2020 was the start for many credit card companies to take a look at their consumer spending programs, to evaluate their financial standing, and in an effort to minimize their free travel liabilities on their balance sheets. They have been steadily devaluing miles earned and points spent for redemption. And this trend will continue to evolve. And many viewers today must be knowledgeable about the ongoing changes to these programs. sites like the Point Sky, TPG, provide us information so that we can be up to date about their award programs, their earning and redemptions, so that the common average traveler knows more about how to maximize their spending. Whether it's low inventory of available seats, small booking windows, or even worse, the decrease of the ways to earn points, whatever the predicament, the Leezel and her team at the Points Guide will be ready to give their evaluations and analysis for all their readers. So thank you again for all of our viewers and listeners who have been able to join our show. Without all of your support, this would not be possible. So we are super thrilled to be able to share our knowledge and experience with all of you. And as the world begins to open up, I hope you can all see each other in person soon, because we all need it. But before I end the show, I would like to throw out a quick plug for PhilPro once more. We are urgently looking for volunteers for the upcoming months and would love to offer any opportunity to anyone who would like to work with individuals like Leezel and myself in projects like the COVID Task Force, Tayo Help, Stop Asian Hate, and of course our mentorship program that helps mold and inspire future Filipino leaders. If you are willing to help as little as 2 hours a week, email me at alvin.adriano@philpro.org, or you can hashtag PhilPro in the comments and we'll be happily able to reach out and contact you. And if you're looking to travel and see how our advisors can help create tailor-made vacations, reach out to our award-winning travel agency, Travelwise International, at 301-248-8898, or visit us on the web at www.itravelwise.com. Smart People Travelwise airs every Tuesday at 12 p.m. PT time and 3 p.m. East Coast time. My name is Alvin Adriano, CEO of Travelwise International, a Filipino-owned and operated travel agency that's been dedicated in serving the Filipino community since 1989. We hope to see you guys next week. Till next time, Smart People Travelwise.
This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio.